September 2019. The damp, cold air enveloped the Ocean Springs Public Library in Mississippi, a red brick building less than a mile from the Biloxi River. The beam of investigator Ava Reese's flashlight cut through thick dust, illuminating a concrete floor that had lain undisturbed for nearly 80 years. Central, I need forensics and an excavation team at the Ocean Springs Library. We've just found something unusual beneath the floor. Her voice echoed in the musty space, bouncing off moss-covered walls. What began as a routine structural survey had turned into a discovery no one expected. Something that would answer questions haunting Ocean Springs for 78 years. As the first layer of cement was removed, a sharp smell of chlorine and old lime wafted up. Minutes later, the excavation team uncovered an object resembling human bones, wrapped in rotting dental cloth. "Stop, that's not a pipe," a technician whispered, voice choked. They halted the machinery, knelt and shone their lights closer, and there, in the dim glow, a partial skull emerged. Beside it lay a scrap of fabric stained with darkened red, and a piece of metal wire. There was no doubt this was a body. Police sealed off the scene within 30 minutes. News spread quickly through the small coastal town, where residents still viewed the library as a symbol of knowledge and peace. No one imagined that beneath its foundation lay a piece of history Ocean Springs had once wanted to forget. The name mentioned first in the report, Franklin Cole. Franklin, 44, a respected and beloved lumber shop owner, vanished on the morning of September 12, 1941. He told his wife he was stopping by Dr. Gabriel Nunez's dental clinic before heading to the shop. That was the last time Margaret Cole saw her husband. The next day, Franklin's Ford was found by the Biloxi marsh, its door open, coffee cup spilled, keys still inside. No blood, no struggle, no trace, and no Franklin. The last person known to have an appointment with him, Dr. Nunez, claimed the patient never showed up. But his nurse told a different story that morning. The clinic was empty, the door locked, and the doctor was gone for nearly an hour. Police searched and found the basement reeking of chemicals and freshly laid cement. Yet, with no body, no evidence, no warrant, the case was closed by the end of 1941 with a brief note, missing, cause undetermined. Time passed. Nunez left town, and Margaret lived alone until her death. Later generations knew the story only as an old legend. Until 2019, when Ava Reese and the MBI forensics team found those remains lying quietly beneath the library where Nunez's clinic once stood. The discovery at Ocean Springs wasn't just the end of a missing person case, it was the first domino in a chain of events revealing a secret buried for 8 decades. When the body's identity was confirmed and its link to Dr. Nunez proven, Mississippi faced a horrifying truth. The trusted man who once fixed the town's smiles was at the heart of a crime. The Franklin Cole case wasn't just a cold case solved, it was a testament to the persistence of modern forensics. A family's faith in justice not being buried, and the power of memory, speaking out after 80 years of silence. It was also a story of a small community torn apart by truth. In 1941, when Franklin vanished, suspicion spread through Ocean Springs like wildfire. Neighbors accused each other. Families stopped speaking. Now, as the truth surfaced, old cracks widened once more. What made this case especially haunting was that the answer was never far away. The man responsible for Franklin Cole's death was questioned in the initial investigation, but slipped through. For decades, he lived among the community, attended church, fixed their children's teeth, smiled at the victim's widow, and carried that terrible secret until his death. Where are you reading from today? Leave your location in the comments below. I'm always curious to know how far these stories travel and how they connect us across time. Tonight, we'll return to Ocean Springs in 1941, tracing the steps of this strange disappearance, the 8-decade investigation, and the breakthrough no one saw coming that brought justice back to Mississippi. This is a story of trust, betrayal, silence, and ultimately justice, delayed but never denied. September 1941 Ocean Springs was still a small riverside town, with a slow, peaceful rhythm. Wooden houses lined the main street, dusted with fine dirt, while in the distance stood the sawmill, church, and docks, where people lived off carpentry, fishing, and lumber trade between Mississippi and Louisiana. Franklin Cole, 44, owned a long-standing lumber shop, respected by the town for his calm demeanor and dedication to his work. He lived with his wife Margaret in a two-story house overlooking old pines. Their life was simple, orderly, familiar, so much so that no one could imagine anything unusual happening. The Coles were close with Dr. Gabriel Nunez, a Cuban-born dentist who settled in Ocean Springs a few years earlier. He opened a small clinic on Government Street and quickly became Franklin's friend. The two often shared morning coffee or helped each other fix machinery at the shop. That morning, Franklin woke as usual, read the paper, and told Margaret he'd stop by Nunez's clinic before heading to the shop. She watched him prepare and leave, the wooden door closing softly in the dim autumn light. A neighbor saw Franklin's old Ford turn toward the Riverside Road. That was the last anyone saw of him. As the sun set behind the pines, Margaret grew uneasy when her husband didn't return. She called the shop, where a worker said Franklin hadn't been there all day. She called friends, the church, then Nunez's clinic. But no one had seen him. By evening, her unease turned to a quiet fear, the kind that creeps in when instinct knows something is wrong. Finally, she put on a coat and walked to the small police station in the town center to report her husband missing. Sheriff Walter Hines, a man in his 50s, was on duty when she arrived. He listened quietly, jotting details in a brown notebook, then called the deputy, ordering a search team for the next morning. That night, Ocean Springs sank into heavy silence. Sparse oil lamps lined the main street, and the steady croak of frogs echoed from the marsh. In the Cole house, Margaret sat alone at the dining table, eyes fixed on the dark window. Every small sound outside made her jump. In a small town like Ocean Springs, a man vanishing without a trace unnerved everyone. Franklin was well known. He'd run the lumber shop for over 15 years, familiar with most workers in the area. The next morning, as the church bell rang, Sheriff Hines arrived at the Cole house with 2 officers and a few militia volunteers. He asked Margaret again about Franklin's usual route, marking a small map on the table with a pencil. Franklin's typical path ran along the pine forest's edge, connecting to a red dirt road leading to the Biloxi River and nearby marshes. Hines split the group. One team searched around the lumber shop, the other along the river and marsh. Each carried flashlights, wooden poles and ropes, using small boats to check deeper waters. Local fishermen volunteered their boats, and the militia brought an old tracking dog. The morning passed in a heavy atmosphere. On the dirt roads, footprints and tire tracks marked fresh mud, but none could be identified. Police went door to door, but no one recalled seeing Franklin the previous day. By noon, the harsh sun turned marsh steam into a thick haze. The group rested under an old pine, drinking water and discussing the next steps. A fisherman, Sam Tucker, who'd lived by Biloxi Bayou for over 20 years, told Hines he'd seen a car parked oddly near the marsh road the morning Franklin vanished. It was silver gray, old, like the Ford Franklin drove to market. The detail caught Hines' attention. He asked Tucker to lead the way. The group followed a narrow path through reeds and low grass, tires slipping on thick mud. At the bend, they found a car tilted off the road, its rear wheels sunk, door ajar. The license plate matched Franklin Cole's registration, no sign of anyone else nearby. Hines stepped out, examined the surrounding mud, and signaled everyone to stay back. He ordered no one to touch the vehicle and had the area marked off. Nearby residents watched silently, their faces a mix of worry and fear. In the humid afternoon air, the only sounds were buzzing insects and the river lapping at the reeds. As the sun set, the search continued around the car, wading through flooded paths and shining lights into thick grass. No one found a trace of Franklin. The search stretched into full darkness, with oil lamps and torches flickering on the water. Franklin's car remained still, cold, and meaningless in the empty marsh, while the man they sought seemed to have dissolved into the dense night of the Biloxi swamp. The next morning, Sheriff Hines returned to the area where the car was found. The damp ground was still cloaked in fog, and the smell of wild grass. The Jackson County Police technical team was already there, equipped with cameras and measuring tools. The area was cordoned off with rope, keeping curious onlookers away from the main road. Hines ordered a detailed report, starting with the car's position relative to the road, its orientation, the condition of the tires, doors, and surrounding soil. Franklin's gray Ford remained tilted as it was the previous night, its rear wheels half sunk in mud, with dried watermarks under the chassis, indicating it had been stuck after stopping. When the door was opened, police noted the driver's seat had no mud, the steering wheel was clean, and there were no signs of a struggle. On the passenger seat, a ceramic coffee mug lay tipped over, its contents dried into a brown stain spreading across the upholstery. Under the floorboard was a folded Biloxi Daily Herald, its right corner stained with a drop of old coffee. In the glove compartment was a dental appointment card for September 12th, bearing Franklin Cole's name, signed by Dr. Gabriel Nunez. Nothing else was found, except a thin jacket and a spare set of keys. An officer measured the distance from the car door to the road's edge, and noticed another set of tire tracks nearby, smaller, not matching the Ford's tires. These tracks were deeper, heading back toward the road, as if another vehicle had stopped alongside and then left. Hines ordered photos of the tracks and a mud sample collected for storage. A few meters from the car's front, they found two large men's shoe prints heading toward the marsh. The prints were faint, shallow, suggesting a hurried walk, but no stumbling. From there to the reed-covered bank, the ground was wet, with crushed grass, but no further signs. Hines noted the scene showed no sharp objects, no blood, no signs of a collision. He wrote in his notebook, no evidence of a struggle. Victim's direction of movement, undetermined. After documenting the scene, the car was covered, sealed, and towed to the Ocean Springs police station for thorough inspection. Mud samples, tire tracks, and items inside were packaged separately and numbered. Hines had a diagram of the area drawn, noting the car's orientation and distance to the main road for future reference. By noon, work at the scene was temporarily concluded. He looked around the silent marsh, hearing only distant waterfowl and the damp air rising from the ground. Everything seemed too neat, too clean for an accident or escape. No skid marks, no dropped items, no belongings left behind outside the car. Franklin Cole's Ford sat silently in the empty lot, as if deliberately placed there. In the preliminary report to Jackson County, Hines noted, "Scene unusual, not yet determined as a crime." The official investigation began there, but at that point, it was still just the inexplicable disappearance of a man everyone in town knew. That afternoon, after the car was taken to the station, Sheriff Hines decided to visit Margaret Cole to gather more information about the missing man's habits and close relationships. The Cole house sat on a quiet street near the river, curtains still drawn, with smoke rising silently from a kettle in the small kitchen. Margaret opened Yolsa the door, looking exhausted, her eyes shadowed from 2 sleepless nights. She invited Hines into the living room, where a newspaper and an old coffee cup still sat on the table, as if time in the house had stopped since Franklin left. Hines opened his notebook, starting with familiar questions: what hours Franklin worked, if he traveled often, if he'd met anyone unusual recently. Margaret answered slowly, sometimes pausing to recall details. She said her husband went to work regularly, leaving before 7 each morning and returning in the afternoon, rarely absent without reason. In the past 2 weeks, Franklin had complained of insomnia and mild headaches, often visiting Dr. Nunez's dental clinic, which also treated jaw-related nerve pain. He trusted Dr. Nunez, Margaret said softly. They'd known each other for years, played chess, talked about work. She added that the Coles and Nunez often met on weekends, sometimes sharing dinners, and the doctor had helped Franklin fix a sawmill machine earlier that summer. When Hines asked about the morning Franklin disappeared, Margaret said he left as usual, ate breakfast, and mentioned stopping by Nunez's clinic for medicine before heading to the shop. He said he'd be back soon, she emphasized. He didn't take luggage or money, just the car keys. Her voice held no suspicion, only quiet worry. Hines asked about Franklin's recent mood, whether he seemed troubled or showed signs of wanting to leave. Margaret shook her head. Nothing like that. He loved his work, loved this house. I never saw him distressed. Hines took notes, then asked about Dr. Nunez, probing the closeness of their relationship. Margaret said they were very close, meeting often and helping each other. Gabriel is a good man, she said. He treated Franklin like a brother. They talked about everything, from work to town matters. When Hines asked if she was certain Franklin said he was going to the clinic that morning, Margaret nodded firmly. I heard it with my own ears, she said. He mentioned the doctor's name and drove off. Hines wrote his final note. Last known intended destination, Nunez Clinic, Government Street. Before leaving, he glanced around the house, noting its careful order, no signs of a rushed departure or disturbance. Everything suggested Franklin had stepped out for a normal morning and vanished on a short journey for reasons no one could fathom. As the sheriff left, Margaret stood on the porch, watching the police car fade down the pine-shaded road. In his notebook, Hines underlined the one clear lead so far: the appointment at Dr. Gabriel Nunez's clinic the morning Franklin Cole disappeared. The next morning, Sheriff Hines sent for Dr. Gabriel Nunez to come to the Ocean Springs police station for questioning. The doctor arrived mid-morning, carrying his usual calm demeanor. A man in his 40s, tall, with neatly combed hair and a crisp white shirt, Nunez was seen in town as polite, soft-spoken, and always helpful. Hines invited him to sit on an old wooden chair in the office, starting with casual questions before getting to the point. When asked about the day Franklin disappeared, Nunez answered without hesitation. He didn't show up for his appointment. He said he was at the clinic around 6:30 that morning, opened the door, checked equipment, and waited for the first patient. Franklin usually arrived early, but that day he didn't appear. Nunez said he waited until 8, then saw another patient. I didn't leave the clinic all morning, he said evenly. By noon, I heard he was missing. Hines jotted down every detail, noticing Nunez chose his words carefully, as if rehearsed. After the main questions, Hines called in the clinic's nurse, Clara Dawes, a woman in her 30s who'd worked for Nunez since the clinic opened. Clara seemed nervous entering the room. She said she was at the clinic by 6, cleaning the operating room, then left to buy medical supplies and gauze at a nearby store. When she returned, just after 7, the doctor wasn't there. The door was locked, lights off, with only his car parked out back. She waited a while, then went home, assuming he'd stepped out for breakfast. This caught Hines' attention. If Clara was correct, Nunez was absent from the clinic between 6:30 and 7 when Franklin left home. Hines asked the doctor again, avoiding mention of the nurse's statement, only confirming the clinic's opening time and when the first patient arrived. Nunez repeated he was there, from morning to noon, never left. He added Clara might be mistaken, since she went shopping early and sometimes mixes up times. Hines didn't react immediately. He asked the clerk to check the timing of appointments in Nunez's patient log. Inside, Franklin Cole was listed for 7 a.m., right after opening. The neat handwriting had a small check mark, confirming the appointment. You had Franklin scheduled that morning, correct? Hines asked. Nunez nodded. Yes, but he didn't show. Maybe he changed his mind. The sheriff closed his notebook, writing briefly, timeline uncertain, possible inconsistency. That afternoon, Hines sent 2 officers to check the area around the clinic to confirm if Nunez's car had moved that morning. A neighbor, a plumber living nearby, said he saw the doctor's ivory-colored car leave the lot early before sunrise and return shortly after. He couldn't recall the exact time, only saying before 7, definitely still foggy. When Hines compared this to Nunez's account, the contradiction was clear. The doctor claimed he never left the clinic, while the nurse and neighbors said otherwise. Though there was no basis for a conclusion yet, Hines sensed something was off. He ended the interview calmly, saying it was routine for missing person cases, and saw Nunez out. As the doctor left the office, Hines stood by the window, watching his figure disappear down Government Street. He pulled out his notebook and underlined 2 lines, questionable timeline of movement. Nurse's statement contradicts doctor's. Needs verification. That evening, in an internal report sent to Jackson County, he wrote clearly, "The last person who may have seen Franklin Cole is Dr. Gabriel Nunez." The doctor claims the victim did not arrive at the clinic, but current testimony suggests an unaccounted-for time gap on the morning of the disappearance. Further investigation needed. Ocean Springs remained as quiet as ever, but to Hines, the silence now felt unnatural. A man vanishing without a trace, a car abandoned by the marsh, and a doctor with inconsistent statements, these scattered pieces began forming a picture in his mind, still lacking color, but with every outline pointing to one name, Gabriel Nunez. The next morning, as the report on Nunez's questioning was sent to Jackson County, Sheriff Hines remained troubled by the gaps in the doctor's account. He ordered a continued sweep of the Biloxi Bayou area, where Franklin Cole's car was found, hoping to find additional witnesses who might have seen something that morning. In a small town like Ocean Springs, everyone knew each other, so police questions quickly spread among the fishing community. By mid-morning, a middle-aged man named William Bill Carter, a fisherman on the Biloxi River, came to the station, saying he might have seen something odd. Hines invited him in and asked for details. Bill said that on the morning of Franklin's disappearance, he went to the docks early, around dawn, when fog still hung, to check his nets. While rowing along the marsh, about half a mile from the main road, he saw a light-colored car leaving a dirt path toward the reeds. "I remember it clearly," Bill said, "because cars don't usually go there that early. And it was smaller than Cole's Ford, more like the kind doctors drive." Hines pressed for details on color and shape. Bill replied, "Ivory, maybe yellowish, rounded tail. I think it was Nunez, since I see him drive through Government Street every morning." The witness confirmed the car was seen just before sunrise, around the time Franklin left home. After hearing this, Hines carefully noted the details and sent someone to Bill's house to verify the observation point and direction. The area Bill described was close to where Franklin's Ford was found. If his account was accurate, the light-colored car left the area hours before the search team discovered Franklin's vehicle. This caught Hines's attention, as only 3 ivory-colored cars existed in town then. One owned by the mayor, one by a grocer, and the third by Dr. Gabriel Nunez. That afternoon, Hines visited the clinic on Government Street to inspect Nunez's car. He used an administrative pretext, saying he needed to verify vehicle details related to the missing person case. Nunez remained cooperative, inviting him to the back of the clinic, where his Plymouth P10 was parked under a tree. The light-colored car, still fairly new, bore a 1940 registration. From a distance, it looked clean, but as Hines approached, he noticed wet brown mud caked under the chassis. Thick mud clung to the rear tires and wheel wells, unlike the polished body. When asked, Nunez smiled and said he'd driven to a patient's house in the South End the previous day, where road construction caused the mess. Hines nodded without comment, but jotted in his notebook, "Undercarriage with wet mud, matches Biloxi Bayou soil type." He requested photos and a small sample for comparison, which Nunez allowed, though his expression briefly tightened. Back at the station, Hines sent the soil sample to the county's technical team. The preliminary report showed the mud's composition and mineral content matched the Biloxi Bayou area where Franklin's car was found. However, this was only circumstantial evidence, insufficient for legal action. Hines sent a summary to the district attorney, noting need to further verify witness Bill Carter's statement, "Mud analysis matches, but not conclusive. In the following days, Hines quietly monitored Nunez's routine. The clinic operated normally, with patients coming and going, and Nunez acted as if nothing was amiss. To the community, he remained the exemplary doctor, treating children's teeth and visiting the elderly. But in the police file, under last person connected to the victim, Gabriel Nunez's name was underlined twice. Hines knew his evidence was fragmented: a witness's account of a car, some mud, and an unaccounted-for time gap on the morning Franklin vanished. These weren't enough for prosecution, but clarified the broader picture. The disappearance was no longer just a mysterious departure. Beneath the Biloxi Bayou's mud, something seemed hidden, and Hines knew the path to the truth would be difficult, especially when the suspect was someone the entire town trusted. 2 days after receiving the soil analysis from Jackson County, Sheriff Hines took a further step. The scattered details, Franklin's car, the nurse Clara Dawes' contradictory statement, a witness seeing a light-colored car near Biloxi Bayou, and matching mud on Nunez's undercarriage, were enough to request a search warrant for the clinic on Government Street. That morning, Hines, 2 officers, and a county judicial officer went to Ocean Springs City Hall, presenting the request to the local judge. The warrant was signed that morning, authorizing a search of Dr. Gabriel Nunez's dental clinic for evidence related to the disappearance of citizen Franklin Cole. Around 9, they arrived at the 2-story brick building housing the clinic. Outside, the Gabriel Nunez DDS sign hung neatly, curtains drawn, with a faint antiseptic smell. Nunez opened the door, unsurprised. He wore a white lab coat and nodded politely as Hines presented the warrant. "I understand," he said evenly. "Do what you need to do." Hines split the team. One group documented the rooms, the other checked the supply storage and basement where the air compressor and water pipes were. Clara Dawes, the nurse, was asked to assist, identifying medical items and unlocking cabinets. She seemed tense but cooperative. The clinic had 3 small rooms, a reception, the main treatment room, and a back storage area. Initially, everything appeared orderly, tools neatly arranged, medicine shelves tidy, floors spotless. In the storage room, an officer found 2 brown glass bottles labeled sodium fictional, sedative. One was sealed, the other opened with a few crushed pills inside. Hines asked Nunez their purpose. The doctor replied, "Mild sedative, used for tooth extractions with anxious patients, only when necessary." He said this calmly, but Hines noticed his hand briefly clench as the officer photographed the evidence. Then, the basement team called Hines down. In the left corner, near the back wall, the cement floor was a darker gray, smoother, with a faint lime smell. When tapped, it gave a dull, uneven echo. A small water streak ran near the door. An officer whispered, "Looks recently patched, sir." Hines knelt, touching the cement's edge, feeling its smoothness and slight dampness. Nearby was a half-used paint can and some small construction tools. "What's this area, doctor?" Hines asked. Nunez answered promptly, "I had a pipe leak fixed here, had to break and repatch the floor." "You did it yourself?" "With a hired worker's help. I just supervised." Hines asked for the worker's name, but Nunez said he couldn't recall, just some passing laborer. This was noted but unverifiable then. The technical team began measuring and photographing the suspicious floor area. They recorded a strong disinfectant smell, overpowering the cement's dampness. Police collected a small floor sample for analysis and an air sample from the room. Back upstairs, Hines noticed a small logbook on the desk, listing drug inventory. A quick scan showed sodium fictional entries for 2 bottles received early September, days before Franklin's disappearance. This caught his attention. Nunez explained, "I order in batches. Some anxious patients need a light dose, nothing unusual." Hines noted it without reaction. The search lasted into early afternoon. Beyond the 2 bottles and the newly patched floor, nothing stood out. Hines considered breaking the basement floor, but per regulations, the current warrant didn't allow it. That required a new warrant with specific criminal suspicion. He had the area sealed, marked with police tape, and photographed as evidence. Before leaving, he instructed Nunez not to alter the structure or move materials until further notice. On the drive back, Hines summarized in his notebook, evidence collected 2 sodium fictional bottles. Basement has new cement floor, strong disinfectant smell. Doctor claims pipe repair. Need to verify drug source and construction materials. That evening at the police station, he briefed the deputy investigator. The findings were suspicious but lacked a decisive piece. No body, no direct evidence. Franklin reached the clinic that day, and everything remained circumstantial. Yet the image of the fresh cement and the chemical smell in the basement haunted Hines all night. In the old sheriff's mind, the sense of something hidden beneath that floor grew stronger. But he knew the law without concrete evidence, he could only wait. The following weeks passed heavily. The clinic search yielded no solid results, and analyses of the cement, sedatives, and mud provided no conclusive evidence. The Jackson County Technical Report found the basement's cleaning chemicals were standard chlorine and phenol, common in medical facilities. The new cement showed no biological or unusual organic traces. The seized sodium fictional bottles, one sealed, one opened, were confirmed as licensed sedatives with valid import records. Everything was legally compliant, insufficient for charges. Through October and November, Hines had teams check roads around Biloxi Bayou, question households, and search regional hospitals and inns. No one had seen Franklin since he left home. Divers scoured the Biloxi River, but found no body or clothing. Franklin's Ford sat in the evidence lot, silent and meaningless. In the nearly 200-page investigation log, the final entries repeated, no results, no new witnesses, no additional evidence. In early December 1941, Hines called a meeting at the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office to present the full case file. Attendees included the chief prosecutor, 2 legal assistants, and a state police representative. Hines outlined the investigation, from the car's discovery to the clinic search. He listed 3 main possibilities. First, Franklin Cole might have had an accident on his way home, with his body yet unfound. Second, he might have left voluntarily, though unlikely due to no preparation signs. And finally, possible homicide, but no direct evidence to prove it. The chief prosecutor, after reviewing the evidence and statements, concluded that the case lacked sufficient grounds for criminal charges. "We can't build an indictment on assumptions," he said, his voice weary. "No body, no murder weapon, no witness to a crime. All we have is a missing man and a doctor with a few inconsistencies in his story." An assistant suggested quietly monitoring Nunez, but the prosecutor shook his head. "Close the file until new evidence surfaces. We can't keep investigating unprovable leads indefinitely." Hines sat silently, clutching his notebook tightly. He knew that, per regulations, the case would be classified as missing, cause undetermined, meaning all search efforts would cease, and the file would be archived awaiting new leads. It was the outcome every investigator dreaded, especially when instinct told him something was hidden within the ground he'd already covered. Days later, the 1941 investigation's final report was completed. The 40-page document included sections on the crime scene, witness statements, evidence inventory, and the official conclusion. In the conclusion, the district prosecutor wrote, "No body or evidence was found to indicate Franklin Cole was a victim of a crime. No signs of violence or robbery were present. The collected evidence, car, coffee mug, sedatives, cement, does not establish a direct link to a crime. Therefore, it is recommended to temporarily close the case and classify it as missing, cause undetermined." On December 29, 1941, the case was renumbered as Case File #41192 and sent to the Jackson County Archives. All evidence was sealed and stored in a steel safe. Hines signed the final page of the report with a slightly trembling hand, then closed the file. He knew he had no other choice. World War II was escalating. Investigation budgets were drained, and manpower was diverted to other cases. As he left the courthouse, Late afternoon settled over the town. From a distance, the Biloxi River flowed quietly in the hazy sunset, reflecting glimmers from the church and docks. Hines paused, looking toward the dirt road where the ford was found. The smell of chlorine, the fresh cement, and the doctor's eyes when questioned about that morning lingered in his mind. But all of it was now just a feeling, inadmissible in a legal file. Ultimately, Franklin Cole's disappearance closed in silence. No arrests were made, no charges filed, and no one spoke of it after the new year. The final line in Sheriff Hines' report was brief. No conclusion, cause undetermined. File archived pending new evidence. In Ocean Springs, people grew accustomed to saying Franklin Cole must have gone somewhere far, a gentle phrase for a disappearance no one truly believed was natural. Case file, #41192, was archived in Jackson County in early January 1942. The thin, brown hardcover file, tied with faded cloth string, contained investigation reports, crime scene photos, and a copy of the prosecutor's report. On the spine, a clerk wrote, "Franklin Cole, disappearance, 1941. After that day, no one opened it again. Ocean Springs quickly returned to its usual rhythm. The war spread, men enlisted, Franklin's lumber shop was taken over by a distant relative and closed a few years later. Margaret Cole lived alone in the small riverside house, keeping her husband's room as it was the morning he left. She never remarried, never left Ocean Springs, only occasionally visiting the church and tending her backyard garden. Neighbors said every September she placed a bouquet on the porch steps, a private ritual no one dared question. Over decades, Franklin Cole's name was mentioned sparingly as an old tale, a man who vanished without trace or explanation. As for Gabriel Nunez, the doctor practiced for a few more years, but silent suspicion never left him. Though no one openly accused him, whispers followed him at church or on the street. In 1948, Nunez sold his clinic and moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, opening a smaller dental practice. His medical records remained clean, and in 1965, his death notice reported he passed from a heart attack at 64. The death certificate was sent to Jackson County for administrative closure, marking the end of the name at the center of the 1941 disappearance file. Margaret Cole lived quietly for years, becoming the solitary old woman the town recognized but rarely spoke to. She died in 1979, with no close kin, buried beside an empty plot in the town cemetery, where a headstone later read, "Beloved wife of Franklin Cole." The case faded from discussion. The officers involved had retired or passed away. Hines, the only one still haunted, died in 1958. Among his papers, a note was found with a single line, "Cole case, never closed in my mind." In the Jackson County Archives, case #41192 sat on a wooden shelf on the third tier, among hundreds of wartime cases. Dust thickened, papers yellowed, and crime scene photos faded over time. No one remembered it, and no one had reason to open it. Nearly 80 years passed, and it seemed the case had sunk into oblivion, with only silent pages bearing witness to an unsolved disappearance. Nearly 80 years later, the Cole family's small house on Ocean Springs Old Street still stood, its tiled roof moss-covered, windows peeling, and backyard overgrown with weeds. In early summer 2019, Emily Cole, Franklin's 32-year-old granddaughter, returned to the family home to restore it. The house had passed through relatives, mostly abandoned, with failing utilities. Emily, a young architect from Jackson, wanted to preserve it as part of the family legacy she knew only through old photos and vague stories from her father. While clearing the ground floor, she noticed a cracked wall behind the fireplace, with plaster flaking off. Tapping with a small hammer, she heard a hollow sound. Thinking it was a structural void, she carefully removed bricks, revealing a small cavity containing a dust-covered tin box. The square box was rusted, its lock broken. Emily took it to the porch and pried it open with a knife. Inside, wrapped in darkened wax paper, were a few items: a white ceramic mug with a blue rim, cracked at the lip, with dried brown residue; a dental appointment card, faintly printed with appointment, Dr. Gabriel Nunez, Sept. 12, 1941; an old photo of two smiling men in front of a clinic, the back inscribed identifying the man on the left as Franklin Cole and the other as Dr. Nunez, and a small cloth, stiffened and speckled with dark brown stains, that instinct told Emily weren't ordinary dirt. She sat motionless for a long time, staring at the items spread on the table. They bore time's mark, but felt heavier than other relics she'd found in the house. From childhood, Emily had heard the story of her missing grandfather, a sad family legend passed down, but no one had details or possessions tied to him. Now these objects felt like silent evidence from the past, waiting nearly 80 years to be found. That afternoon, she took the tin box to the Ocean Springs police station. The duty officer, a young sergeant, listened, recorded her statement, and advised transferring the items to the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, which handled old cases. Emily drove over 2 hours to Jackson County, carrying the box wrapped in a cloth bag. At the MBI office, she completed the handover process. The receiving officer opened a report, photographed each item, and sealed them with evidence tags. As Emily signed the form, she glimpsed the cold administrative text and felt like she was closing an intangible circle that had lingered in her family's history. The case officer, a cold case unit investigator, asked for details when the house was built, where the items were found, any notable smells or signs. Emily answered carefully, recalling everything. She noted a metallic, musty smell when opening the box, but nothing else unusual. The investigator recorded this and said the items would be tested in the state lab. As she prepared to leave, he handed her a receipt, saying softly, "Thank you for preserving this, not everyone does." That evening, driving back to her Jackson hotel, Emily stopped by a bridge overlooking the Biloxi River. The dark water flowed quietly under yellow streetlights, reflecting like old metal. She thought of the grandfather she never met, the cracked mug, the faded appointment card, and wondered why someone hid them in a wall. Were they evidence of something her family never dared consider? The MBI logged the items under unclassified evidence, Cole family residence. The initial report noted, evidence recovered from property owned by victim's descendant, 1941 disappearance. Intact condition. Recommend DNA and chemical analysis. The tin box was placed in a refrigerated evidence locker, tagged, and awaited testing. No one then could know that these four seemingly mundane items, the mug, card, photo, and cloth, would reopen a case Ocean Springs had long forgotten. The evidence from Emily Cole was quickly transferred to the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation's Cold Case Unit, based at MBI headquarters in Jackson, specializing in unresolved cases spanning decades. In their digital archives, Franklin Cole's name appeared once, noted faintly. Disappearance, 1941, Jackson County. This flagged the case for priority review. Investigator Ava Reese, a woman in her 40s with years of forensic experience, took charge of the tin box and its contents, along with Emily's handover report. The items were sent to the central lab. Technicians photographed each piece, taking separate physical and biological samples. The cloth with dark brown stains was split, one part for DNA testing, the other preserved. The cracked mug was ultrasonically cleaned, and residue from its base was extracted for mass spectrometry. Initial results came after 2 weeks. The cloth's brown stains showed human hemoglobin. Mitochondrial DNA matched the Cole lineage, confirmed via Emily's reference sample. This meant the cloth had direct contact with Franklin Cole, or an item bearing his blood. For the team, this was the first physical proof of the victim's existence after over 70 years. Ava read the report, then opened the old case hash 41192 file sent from Jackson County. The black and white photos of the car scene and Hines' statements, yellowed but clear, chilled her. The spilled coffee mug, the dental appointment card, and the last known destination, Gabriel Nunez's clinic. Analysis of the mug yielded a surprising find. The residue contained traces of sodium fictional, a barbiturate sedative used in dentistry and surgery in the 1930s, 1940s. The lab noted, not typical coffee residue, confirmed presence of a central nervous system depressant. Ava cross-checked Mississippi's 1941 medical records, stored in the state's historical archives. Only 4 facilities in Jackson County were licensed to import sodium fictional, and only Dr. Gabriel Nunez's Ocean Springs Clinic had a personal registration. This coincidence piqued Ava's interest. She sent a preliminary report to her supervisor. Initial evidence suggests the victim was exposed to a sedative linked to a local dental facility. Historical ties between the victim and Dr. Nunez require verification. Meanwhile, the team digitized the 1941 file, cross-referencing statements and clinic diagrams. From a hand-drawn sketch in the old file, Ava noted the basement Hines described as having new cement and a strong chemical smell. Current maps showed the building was demolished in the late 1960s, replaced by the Ocean Springs Public Library. Ava contacted local authorities to verify the old structure's foundation. The land registry confirmed the 1940 building's brick foundation was retained when the library was built, reinforced with new concrete. This meant the basement Hines noted might still lie beneath the current floor. This was logged as a key finding. Ava briefed the cold case director on the possibility of unexamined physical evidence within the current structure. Per regulations, excavation or archaeological work in a civilian area required approval from the Jackson County Court and coordination with the Mississippi Heritage Preservation Bureau. Ava and MBI's legal team prepared a request, citing scientific grounds and evidence, the cloth with the victim's DNA, sodium fictional in the mug, and 1941 pharmaceutical records linking the drug. In the court application, Ava wrote, "There is reasonable basis to believe that evidence or remains related to the disappearance of citizen Franklin Cole may exist at the former site of Dr. Gabriel Nunez's clinic, now the Ocean Springs Public Library." The archaeological permit was approved after over a month of review. The town agreed to temporarily close the library's basement for the investigation. When Ava received the red stamp decision, she saw case #41192 reopened on the digital file and felt an indescribable mix of closing an intangible debt and embarking on a challenging new journey. From a tin box found by chance in a wall, a disappearance buried for 80 years was reborn in the light of modern forensics. The excavation began on an autumn morning in 2019. Under MBI and Mississippi Heritage Preservation oversight, the Ocean Springs Public Library's basement was fully sealed, taped, and marked with warning signs. The building was quieter than usual, lit only by the white glow of industrial lamps on the old cement floor. Ava Reese, the lead investigator, stood with the forensic team beside a foundation diagram provided by local authorities. The excavation site matched the area Sheriff Hines described in 1941, a patch of newly laid cement with a chemical smell. As the first layer of tiles was removed, the smell of must and old cement dust filled the space. Technicians used industrial drills to break through concrete slabs, each nearly 20 centimeters thick, until the drill hit a differently colored material. At a depth of about 1.80 meters, the drill struck something softer, producing a heavy thud. A technician bent down, shone a light, and whispered, "There's something down here." The team immediately stopped drilling, switching to manual digging. Beneath fine dust and cement fragments, a patch of decayed fabric emerged, rough and brittle like hardened cotton. The technicians carefully scraped away the thin soil layer. The object's structure gradually appeared, a large bundle, tightly wrapped in multiple layers of fabric, with parts exposing small ivory-colored bones. The skull lay tilted, with intact jaw teeth. Nearby was a piece of old rubber cord, likely once used to tie the bundle. The area was immediately sealed as a special crime scene. Ava stood silently, watching the bones flicker in the lamplight, then ordered all machinery stop to avoid damaging the remains. The recovery process took 2 days. Soil was removed layer by layer, each sample collected separately for analysis. Finally, the entire remains were brought to the surface, relatively intact. It was an adult body, curled, wrapped in dental cloth, with ribs and spine fractured in places. Based on the decay, the forensic team estimated the remains had been in a dry, sealed environment for decades. A detail that caught Ava's attention was the fabric around the head, similar to dental bandages used at Nunez's clinic. All evidence was packaged and sent to the state's forensic lab. Identification began the following week. A femur sample was analyzed for DNA, compared to Emily Cole's reference sample, Franklin's direct descendant. Results returned in 10 days, a 100% mitochondrial match, no genetic discrepancies. The official report stated, remains excavated at the Ocean Springs Library site belonged to Franklin Cole, born 1897, missing September 1941. The team also investigated the cause of death. CT scans of the skull showed no signs of blunt trauma, but the neck had 2 misaligned vertebrae, suggesting strangulation or choking while unconscious. Soil around the remains contained traces of fictional, the sedative found in the coffee mug. All evidence aligned with the theory that the victim was drugged before death. A forensic expert noted, the body's position indicates deliberate placement, not natural burial. The wrapped cloth and cement covering suggest intentional concealment. Ava read this multiple times, then closed the file. She requested carbon isotope analysis to estimate the time of death. The results showed bone mineralization consistent with late summer 1941, matching Franklin's disappearance date. When the official results were approved, Ava returned to Ocean Springs with the team, presenting the findings to local authorities. They held an internal press briefing at the library, where the floor had been temporarily restored. On a large table in the old reading room, excavation photos were arranged, the first concrete layer, the dental cloth, the skeletal frame, and accompanying small samples. Together, they formed undeniable proof that beneath this building's floor for 80 years lay the remains of a man the town thought had vanished without a trace. In the report to MVI headquarters, Ava wrote, the remains were found at the site matching Sheriff Hines' 1941 description. The wrapping material and chemical compounds confirm a direct link to Nunez's dental clinic. DNA analysis verifies Franklin Cole's identity. Time of death aligns with the original disappearance file. The evidence supports treating the case as a criminal matter. For the final sentence, Ava paused long before writing, as if feeling the weight of a truth pulled from the earth. The comprehensive forensic report was completed in early November 2019, marking the shift from excavation to crime scene reconstruction. The Mississippi State Lab presented detailed findings. Franklin Cole's cause of death was acute sodium fictional poisoning combined with mechanical asphyxiation. The drug levels in the bone and surrounding soil were far above therapeutic doses, sufficient to cause rapid unconsciousness within minutes. The neck vertebrae misalignment and rib structure indicated restricted breathing before death. No other violent injuries ruled out a fight or accident. From this, the team reconstructed the sequence of events. Ava Reese and forensic experts built a timeline based on the findings, 1941 statements, and recovered evidence. On the morning of September 12, 1941, Franklin Cole left home for Dr. Gabriel Nunez's clinic. Based on the appointment card, the meeting was set for around 7 a.m. at the clinic. They likely had a brief conversation, possibly with Nunez offering Franklin coffee, a common social gesture noted by witnesses in the old file. Residue in the mug found at the car scene confirmed it contained diluted sodium fictional, a drug Nunez was authorized to use. As Franklin left the clinic, the drug took effect. He felt tired, drowsy, and stopped his car near Biloxi Bayou, where the Ford was found. The strong dose caused rapid unconsciousness. Nunez likely followed in his Plymouth P10, supported by the smaller tire tracks and matching mud at the scene. When Franklin collapsed in the car, Nunez may have approached, checked his condition, and realized he had stopped breathing or was near death from respiratory failure. a common seconal overdose complication. No evidence suggested attempts at resuscitation. Forensics indicated Franklin may have been alive for a few final minutes before dying from asphyxiation and drug poisoning. The body was then moved. Based on sediment and mineral distribution on the bones, the victim didn't die at the excavation site, but was brought there hours after death. Abrasions on the arm and knee bones suggested dragging across a hard surface. In the clinic's basement, the fresh cement and chemical smell Hines noted were now understood as concealment efforts. The concrete encasing the remains showed two construction phases, an older layer broken up and a new layer sealed over. Cement samples from Núñez's tools, noted in the 1941 report, matched the excavation site's composition. From these findings, the team built a scenario. Franklin Cole arrived at Núñez's clinic that morning. During their talk, he was given coffee laced with seconal. After leaving, he succumbed to poisoning, lost control, and stopped his car. Núñez followed, found him unconscious, and possibly intended to cover up the incident to avoid liability. The victim died soon after, possibly from a drug reaction or strangulation to silence labored breathing. The body was taken back to the clinic, wrapped in dental cloth, placed in the basement, and sealed under cement. Chemical cleaning and floor restructuring erased initial traces when police searched. The investigation report stated, "No evidence suggests intentional murder with economic or personal motives. However, concealing the body post-death indicates clear criminal intent." Ava noted this might have been an unintended death, but the excessive sedative use and cover-up made it a crime. Hines' 1941 notes, "Chlorine smell, new cement," were the only accurate observation he couldn't prove at the time. The team cross-checked Núñez's drug purchases with state import records. In early September 1941, he ordered double the usual amount of sodium seconal, citing reserves for anxious patients. No records showed use of this amount post-disappearance. The seized excess matched the type and concentration. This aligned perfectly with the forensic timeline. The final report, over 60 pages, included a 3D reconstruction of the scene, Franklin's car at Biloxi Bayou, the doctor's car route, and the body's placement in the basement. All evidence, DNA, chemical, floor structure, sedatives, formed a logical chain. In the conclusion, Ava wrote, "Cause of death, acute sodium seconal poisoning with mechanical asphyxiation. Incident mechanism, victim lost consciousness under the control of a medical practitioner, followed by body concealment. Time of death, morning of September 12, 1941, consistent with the disappearance file." As she penned the final period, Ava looked at the old black and white photo of Franklin and Núñez outside the clinic, sunlight slanting across their smiling faces. They were once friends, trusted each other, but in the gap between them, 80 years later, justice finally reached a truth the past had buried. After the forensic report was finalized, the MBI team moved to verify supporting evidence to strengthen the link between physical findings and human factors. Ava Reese, the lead investigator, requested a review of all financial, pharmaceutical, and administrative records related to Dr. Gabriel Núñez from 1941. Most records were old, kept in ledgers, but the Mississippi State Archives retained copies under medical supply permits. After weeks of cross-checking, Ava found a notable coincidence on September 15, 1941. 3 days after Franklin's disappearance, Núñez ordered a small batch of 2 Portland cement bags and a new sodium seconal shipment from a Biloxi distributor. The order was paid in cash, noted as for facility maintenance and pharmaceutical restocking. Checking older import logs, Ava saw the same drug was ordered 10 days earlier, in similar quantity, highly unusual for a small clinic like his. Concurrently, 1941 state tax records showed Núñez had unplanned expenses for construction materials and cleaning chemicals, items outside medical spending. His accounting listed vague details, pipe repairs, and basement cleaning. These expenses fell between September 13 and 20, immediately after the disappearance was reported. When compiled, Ava noted, "Cement, and sedative purchases align with the victim's disappearance, signs of concealment activity. However, what deepened the investigation wasn't just financial data. While reviewing Margaret Cole's archived papers at the Jackson County Historical Center, archivists found an old envelope among personal letters. The pale yellow envelope, undated, bore familiar handwriting. G. Nunez, to M. Inside was a handwritten note in black ink, slanted, faded in spots. The MBI lab confirmed the handwriting matched Nunez's medical documents from the period. The brief note carried an intimate yet remorseful tone. I know things went too far. I only wanted to help, but now everything feels heavy. If I could go back, I'd choose silence. For the truth sometimes ruins everything. I pray God forgives what a weak heart led me to do. No line directly mentioned Franklin Cole, but the content suggested guilt and fear of judgment. Linguistic analysts found the phrasing indicated an indirect admission of an ethically overstepping act with potentially severe consequences. By modern legal standards, it wasn't direct evidence, but in the historical context, it supported motive. Ava had the note's date verified through paper and ink analysis. The lab identified a Southern Mill 1941 watermark, matching paper sold in late September that year. The ink was common in offices, mainly sourced from Biloxi. This dated the note to shortly after the disappearance. In an internal report, Ava wrote, "Personal document, possibly reflecting an emotional relationship between Nunez and Margaret Cole, implying guilt or responsibility for an incident." To verify, the team reviewed old civil records. Some elderly Ocean Springs residents recalled that in the late 1930s, the Coles and Nunez were close, often seen together at church events. One witness said, Margaret asked Nunez to treat Franklin's insomnia, and they spoke quite intimately when meeting. Though anecdotal, combined with the letter, it built a new context, a personal, not just professional, connection among the three. From this, Ava wrote in a supplemental report, motive may stem from emotional conflict. Secondal use indicates control, a deliberate act to incapacitate the victim. Financial transactions, the letter, and personal ties support a crime tied to emotional factors, not chance. When the financial records and letter were added to the main investigation, the logic became complete. The doctor purchased cement and drugs post-disappearance, used matching sedatives in the poisoning, and left remorseful words to the victim's connected widow. This not only outlined the act, but revealed the psyche of a man once Franklin Cole's friend, who 80 years later, history finally pinpointed as the tragedy's source. In December 2019, after nearly 6 months of investigation and evidence compilation, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation finalized the Franklin Cole case report, Case Hash 41192. The nearly 300-page document included forensic results, DNA analysis, financial records, the handwritten letter, crime scene photos, and excavation data. In the summary to the State Justice Department, lead investigator Ava Reese wrote, "Investigation conclusion, Franklin Cole died from acute sodium secondal poisoning combined with mechanical asphyxiation occurring at or near Dr. Gabriel Nunez Dental Clinic on the morning of September 12, 1941. Subsequent actions included body concealment and scene destruction with cement materials." The report outlined the key evidence. First, the cloth with the victim's DNA matching the Cole lineage. Second, chemical samples from the coffee mug and soil around the remains, both containing sodium secondal at the same concentration. Third, Nunez's records of drug and cement purchases coinciding with the disappearance. Fourth, Nunez's handwritten letter to Margaret Cole expressing remorse and guilt. Each piece alone was insufficient, but together they formed a complete causal chain. The victim visited the clinic, drank drugged coffee, lost consciousness, died, and his body was hidden in the basement. In assessing motive, the investigation team determined that emotional factors were central. The letter and witness accounts suggested a close relationship between Nunez and Margaret, possibly beyond social norms. Franklin, the husband, became an obstacle. leading to the doctor's moral conflict. The use of fictional, a potent drug only a medical professional could control, indicated premeditation, though not necessarily intent to kill, but resulting in a fatal outcome. Ava wrote in the conclusion, "The deliberate administration of a high-dose sedative, without monitoring the reaction, followed by body concealment, constitutes second-degree murder under current standards." The Mississippi State Prosecutor reviewed the file and agreed with MBI's conclusion. As the suspect died in 1965, a standard prosecution was impossible. However, to acknowledge justice and close the case per modern legal standards, the prosecutor's office issued a posthumous indictment, a rare procedure used when evidence conclusively proves a crime, but the perpetrator is deceased. The decision, signed on December 20, 2019, noted "Case solved, 2019. Criminal Act confirmed responsible party Dr. Gabriel Nunez." Concurrently, judicial authorities sent copies of the conclusion to Ocean Springs authorities and the Jackson County Archives. In a public statement, MBI declared, "After 78 years, Franklin Cole's disappearance has been determined a homicide. Thanks to forensic advancements and the victim's descendants' cooperation, the truth has been restored." The official file was stamped in red and entered into the state's digital system with the status, "Closed, case solved." As Ava Reese signed the final page of the report, she paused, looking at the old black and white photos included, mud-covered ford at Biloxi Bayou, Hines' scrawled notes, and the yellowed letters copy. They spoke for decades of silence. In her personal notes, she wrote briefly, "Justice doesn't vanish. It only sleeps long." On December 27th, MBI held an internal meeting to announce the results to the entire cold case unit. The director spoke briefly, emphasizing this was one of the oldest cases solved in Mississippi's criminal investigation history. He thanked the forensic experts, DNA technicians, historical analysts, and those who reconnected a decades-broken timeline. The Franklin Cole case file was prominently placed in MBI's archive cabinet, labeled Case #41192. Resolved, December 2019. That evening, Ava returned to the office late, alone, checking the paper files before sealing them. Outside the glass window, Jackson glowed with year-end lights, while in the small room, the photocopier stopped as she placed the final seal on the file cover. After 80 years, a once-forgotten disappearance had its answer, with the perpetrator's name clearly inked, Dr. Gabriel Nunez. The press conference announcing the Franklin Cole case results was held on the morning of January 10, 2020, at the Jackson County Courthouse in Pascagoula. The large hall was cleared, wooden benches aligned, microphones and TV cameras set along the corridor. On the podium, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation logo hung beside the national flag. The event, anticipated for weeks after MBI's internal announcement leaked to the press, drew dozens of reporters from local and national outlets. MBI Director Leonard Cray opened with a steady voice, stating the goal. "After nearly 8 decades, we've closed an unsolved case through science and human persistence." Ava Reese was invited to present the investigation process. Behind her, a screen displayed Case #41192, Franklin Cole. Initial images showed the black and white photo of the tilted ford at Biloxi Bayou, then a map of Dr. Gabriel Nunez Clinic and today's Ocean Springs Library. Ava summarized the modern investigation evidence found at the Cole family home: DNA confirming lineage, sodium fictional residue in the coffee mug, and remains excavated under the library basement. She stressed all conclusions relied on physical and historical evidence validated by modern forensics. Dr. Harold Bowman, State Forensic Lab Chief, explained technical details. DNA in the cloth was matched via mitochondrial methods, with over 99.9% reliability. Fictional residue in the mug and soil shared identical optical absorption spectra, confirming a common chemical source. The concrete floor structure and cement composition matched samples from Nunez's old clinic. Together, They form an indisputable evidence system. He paused, scanning the packed room. We didn't solve this with guesses, but with science. Reporters scribbled rapidly. One from the Clarion Ledger asked, "Could this have been an accidental death?" Ava replied calmly. Evidence shows deliberate use of a high-dose sedative and body concealment. While intent level isn't clear, hiding the body and tampering with the scene is criminal. Another asked about motive. Ava said briefly, "Personal factors tied to the suspect's relationship with the victim's family. The archived letter shows remorse, but we won't comment further on private matters." After questions, MBI officially released the posthumous indictment decision against Dr. Gabriel Nunez, confirming Franklin Cole as a 1941 homicide victim. The red stamp decision, signed by MBI, the Jackson County prosecutor, and the State Forensic Lab, was placed on the podium. As Cray read the final line, "Case solved, December 2019, the room fell silent. A few reporters nodded, cameras clicking softly. The press release, issued post-conference, went to major outlets. Within 2 days, the Franklin Cole case hit front pages of the Sun-Herald, the Clarion Ledger, and WLX's Evening News, headlined "Cold Case from 1941 Solved." After 78 years, dentist identified as killer. Experts called it a milestone in state investigation history, showcasing the blend of traditional archives and modern DNA technology. In Ocean Springs, news spread fast. Residents visited the library, once the clinic, to see the now restored excavation site. The local paper published a photo of the library door, captioned, "Beneath this place, justice was found." Some elderly residents, recalling the disappearance, were stunned, saying they never thought the truth would come out. During the announcement day, Ava stood in the courthouse hallway, looking through a glass door at Jackson County's sunlit square. The noise, cameras, and questions faded, leaving an odd peace. The 1941 file's worn pages and Hines' trembling notes were now continued by a new report, closing an 80-year circle. Leaving the courthouse, she lightly touched a bronze plaque reading, "Justice served." Henceforth, Franklin Cole's case was no longer a disappearance, but a resolved story, recorded, announced, and etched into Mississippi's judicial history. After the press conference, the entire Franklin Cole case file was transferred to Jackson County's archives for long-term preservation. In the courthouse basement, the Cold Case Archives section was reorganized, each file numbered by initiation year. Among hundreds of yellowed 20th-century documents, a slot was cleared for the newly closed file labeled #41192, Franklin Cole. The once-forgotten case became an official part of the state's criminal investigation history. On January 20, 2020, Ava Reese personally delivered the evidence for archiving. The white mug with a blue rim, blood-stained cloth, photo of Franklin and Nunez, handwritten letter, and cement samples from the library basement were placed in a specialized aluminum box, barcoded, and stored in a temperature-controlled vault. On the box, Ava wrote in black ink, "Recovered evidence linking 1941 homicide, preserved for study and record." Alongside was the original paper file, including forensic reports, DNA results, excavation maps, crime scene photos, and historical financial records. Each item was sealed in clear plastic, categorized by 1941 and 2019 investigation phases. The Jackson County Cold Case Archive, a 50-square-meter room, was upgraded post-Cole with temperature control and digital storage systems. Each file was scanned into MBI's servers. This case became the first with dual identifiers, as both historical legacy and a resource for investigator training. In a report to the State Justice Department, Ava proposed using the Franklin Cole case as a case study for recovering physical evidence and historical data in cold case investigations. 2 months later, MBI's professional summary was completed. The over 100-page document detailed evidence handling, mitochondrial DNA standards, classical chemical analysis, and historical site mapping via land records. Its introduction read, "Franklin Cole Report." Integrated Investigation Model of Historical Evidence and Modern Forensics. This was sent to the Mississippi Police Academy as mandatory training material for cold case investigation courses. During the review, the MBI director said briefly, "This isn't just a case's end, it shows science and human patience can bring justice across time." Copies of the mug and dental appointment card were displayed in a glass case at the Academy's main hall, captioned, "Recovered after 78 years. Evidence of justice." Ava stood quietly before the case, seeing the evidence now as artifacts. She knew they weren't just proof of a solved death, but lessons for those to come. That no case is truly closed if someone keeps searching. Leaving the archive, she signed the final handover. Bold text on the typed sheet closed a near 80-year journey. Case file hash 41192 archived permanently. Jackson County Cold Case Division. In spring 2020, nearly 3 months after the Franklin Cole case was sealed, Ocean Springs completed a memorial plaque at the public library. Once Dr. Gabriel Nunez Clinic, the dedication ceremony, held on a quiet morning under old oak trees, included local authorities, MBI representatives, and Cole family descendants. The gray granite plaque at the main entrance read, "Here the truth was found. In memory of Franklin Cole. Proof that justice may come late, but never fades." Below smaller text, case hash 41192, closed 2019. Ava Reese gave a brief speech, saying the case proved the value of memory and trust in science. Looking at the building that hid the truth for nearly 80 years, she said softly, "The bricks are still here, but now they tell their true story." In the library's auditorium, locals listened in silence. Some elderly attendees teared up, recalling childhood visits to Nunez, the dentist the town once revered. Post-ceremony, the Ocean Springs Library became a notable site. Schools and forensic institutes added the Franklin Cole case to curriculums on cold case investigation. State media called it a case of belated justice. A Sun-Herald article opened, "In a small riverside town, the bricks of the past gave voice to the dead." The Jackson County Archives saw students researching the case, learning to handle ancient evidence. In MBI's display case, the mug and appointment card sat side by side, with protective covers replaced yearly to prevent damage. Ocean Springs established the Cole Foundation, supporting forensic research and missing persons projects. Funded initially by the community and later by state grants, it aimed to reopen other old cases, continuing the Cole case legacy. MBI saw this as a step toward placing Mississippi among states with robust historical criminal case recovery programs. For Ocean Springs residents, the case's aftermath wasn't just legal. It forced them to revisit their town's history, once proud of its peace, now facing the truth that crime could lurk in familiar homes. A local journalist wrote, "No one wants crime, but acknowledging it matures a community." Post-memorial, high school students created a small documentary project on Ocean Springs' forgotten stories, inspired by the Cole case. MBI's final report was publicly released on its website, downloaded thousands of times in weeks. Criminology journals analyzed it as a model of blending historical data and modern forensics. The National Investigation Conference in Baton Rouge that year opened with the Franklin Cole case, titled "From Silence to Science, Justice Beyond Time." Ava Reese presented the investigation, from the tin box in the wall to the library basement excavation. The audience gave a standing ovation. In August 2020, the case summary appeared in the Mississippi Justice Review, named among the decade's top 10 investigative achievements. The author noted, "No living witnesses, no intact body, but through DNA, chemistry, and persistence, Mississippi answered a question time seemed to bury." In Ocean Springs, every September, the library hangs white ribbons around its porch columns, a community-initiated ritual honoring Franklin Cole. Emily Cole, his granddaughter, occasionally attends. She told a reporter, "I don't see this as a tragedy. It's proof we can keep promises to the past." Outside, the granite plaque stands quietly, its letters catching the afternoon sun. For MBI, the Cole case became a training standard. At the Mississippi Police Academy, students learned to trace faint clues across time, reconstructing scenes from mere artifacts. They learned justice lies not just in verdicts, but in the persistent search for answers. In training, Ava often quotes Sheriff Hines' 1958 note, "Case never closed in my mind." As 2020 ended, the Franklin Cole file was officially marked permanent archive in MBI's system. On the digital file's final page, the text read, "Case closed. Justice achieved." The Biloxi River's winds still blow through town as always, but for Ocean Springs, they now carry a new meaning, a reminder that truth may be buried, but never lost. A 78-year journey reached its end, closing in peace, and leaving a lesson on the power of time, memory, and the persistence of those who believe justice, though late, always endures. The Franklin Cole case isn't just a 78-year investigation, but a powerful metaphor for how modern America confronts its past through transparency, technology, and relentless truth-seeking. In this case, a small ceramic mug with sodium seconal residue, a blood-stained cloth, and Nunez's handwritten letters seemed like mere relics, yet they unlocked justice for a forgotten man. In today's United States, where judicial, medical, or educational systems grapple with misinformation, discrimination, or bureaucratic inertia, this story reminds us that great change begins when someone dares revisit old files, whether in archives or human conscience. The persistence of investigator Ava Reese and descendant Emily Cole proves justice comes not just from authority, but from personal belief in truth, despite time, prejudice, or oblivion. In modern life, as Americans rush through a fast-paced world, this story offers a profound reminder: don't mistake silence for an end, or let memory be buried for fear or convenience. Every honest act, every small effort to restore fairness, even in a small community, can leave a lasting impact. Just as Ocean Springs raised a memorial to restore Franklin Cole's honor, each of us can start by facing the past to heal it, making justice real in the present. Thank you for joining us on this 78-year journey to justice for Franklin Cole, proof that truth may be buried but never vanishes. Please subscribe to the channel to follow more true crime stories where the past still whispers to be heard.